Welcome to the Coachful Coaching Leadership Podcast. I'm David Fung, an executive leadership coach and seasoned people leader. This podcast is all about helping leaders grow, navigate challenges, and build high-performing teams with real stories, insights, and strategies you can apply today. Let's dive in.
Yeah, I had back surgery.
Yeah, you had back surgery 18 days before the Olympics.
The final, yeah.
And you came out 18 days later, won the silver medal in the Olympics. What was going through your head at that time when you knew you had to get surgery and you knew you had this competition coming up?
And, you just try to fight through injuries, really. And got to a point where I couldn't even straighten up and warm up after practice. And they did an x-ray in my back, and the disc had actually ruptured. And a piece had broken off and gone into my nerves.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Coachful Coaching Leadership Podcast. This is David, and today I'm here with a legend, Bob Molle. He's a definition of grit and growth. Bob, he's the only person in history to win both an Olympic medal in wrestling in the 1984 Olympics and two Grey Cup championships in the CFL on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. That's already legendary, but what's more about you, Bob? It's how you did it. Just 18 days after back surgery, if I'm reading this correctly, you stood on the Olympic podium with the silver medal. Now you've turned your mindset into a mission. You're coaching leaders, you're coaching teams about growth through adversity and resilience. So Bob, I welcome you here today to talk about leadership, resilience, and getting comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Some crazy guy wrote about that. Thank you very much, David.
Yeah.
I think we'll have some fun, just my initial impression.
Yes. So Bob and I spent the last 5-10 minutes just setting up the tech, right? But you know what? We just said, to hell with it. Who cares? We'll just talk, right? We'll just have a little chat. So Bob, that was my introduction, my attempt at summarizing you. But how do you introduce yourself when you're in front of a crowd?
Well, it's funny you say that, because a couple of my buddies they refer to me as the playful extrovert. It's so.
Don't they go hand in hand? Playful extrovert, aren't you? Just
I think most people, when they think of Olympic wrestler, it's one of the more brutal sports there is out there, and probably the oldest sport, and stuff like that. You're going to be like a big mean gorilla, but I was probably the size of a gorilla, about 300 pounds.
How tall are you?
6'4".
You're 6'4". You were 300 pounds back then?
Yeah, played pro football, probably about 275 when I wrestled at the Olympics.
Yeah.
Super heavyweight, but I think everybody else would call me a big teddy bear.
Big teddy bear? Okay. I'm going to, you know what, if everyone's favorable, anyone is looking at a video right now, here's what comes up for Bob Molle on a Google search. So that's you there.
Has it got hair?
Yeah. Both on your arms as well as your head. Yeah, and there's some guy's leg being twisted in some odd direction.
That's an old iconic Sports Illustrated picture. That was the picture of me getting into the semifinals of the Olympics, and it's a great pic, actually. You would wonder how these guys get the pics, but I was wrestling Japan at the time at the quarterfinals to get into the semifinals of the Olympics. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Bob, you're the playful extrovert. Let's talk about just some of your origins. So you wrestled in the 1984 Olympics, is that right?
Correct.
I actually did some research before this. You wrestled against an American, right?
Yeah, Bruce Baumgartner. I had trained with him, so I had a pretty good relationship with him. He flew me down. We trained at Oklahoma State together, and I was pretty relationships. Yeah. You and I talked about that. There's a great story behind that one. But he was the first person in the history of the Olympics to win 4 Olympic medals. He'd never been done on the sport of wrestling. He did 84, 88. Again, he won gold in 92, 96. So he was the first 4-time Olympic medalist in the sport of wrestling. It had never been done in the history of the sport before.
Both of you were super heavyweights, right? And super heavyweight is what's that?
Back then, it was everything over 220 pounds.
Only? Okay.
Over 220. And you could be 400 pounds, which you had 350. You had everything. Now after 1986, they put a cap on it. And
Yeah.
you have to weigh under 286, I think it is now,
Yeah. Yeah. 220.
125 kilos. You can't weigh more than that, or you can't wrestle super heavyweight, because some countries were throwing out their, massive 400-pound guy, and it just wasn't good for the sport.
No, no. So I'm guessing like he won four. Like there's not many human beings in the world that are that big as well, right? Like
And he moved well. Everything, I got
and
to
he
know him
moved
quite
well.
well. I had a relationship with him. He was the one that flew me down to Oklahoma State University. He was the assistant coach at the time.
Yeah.
I was at 20, I was ranked fifth in the world. And so
Yeah.
he was the number one ranked wrestler in the world at the time. And I'm still
Yeah.
at university at 20. And he
Yeah.
phoned me up out of the blue. And like, obviously, I had a relationship with him because I unfortunately lost to him, David, at the Pan American Games, the World Cup. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'd known of him quite well, and him being their number one ranked guy in the world at the time. Cool thing was, he phoned me up out of the blue and said, "Yeah, let's come on down. I'll pay for all your training." Rented me a house, and him and I trained together. And there was so many things I learned
Yeah.
from him. It was unbelievable.
So let's talk about that. Like, one of your first lessons about building relationships and training with the best. And for all the leaders out there listening to this episode, you have a methodology about building relationships. You call it R&D, but your R&D is rob and duplicate. So talk more about that. Like in your lead up to your Olympic medal against this Baumgartner, what did you do in your R&D, rob and duplicate? He flew you down and such, right? And he sounded like he was very generous, but it sounded like you learned a lot from him.
And there's so many things I learned from him. I go back, but at the time and then I expanded over my life, my consulting business, all the stuff. R&D, most people, I actually bought the domains for it because I just called it R&D, and most people would call R&D research and development. Mine was always
Yeah.
rob and duplicate. Who's the best person in the world? You know what I mean? And I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
duplicate exactly what they were doing, David. And there was no difference in there. The cool thing was, there's a whole bunch of cool things I learned from him at the time. So he goes down, he goes, "Bob, let's get ready for the Olympics together. How about if I fly you down? I'll rent you a house. I'll pay for your flight. I'll do this," because he gets privately funded. But all that funding he gets, he can't spend it on a house, car, clothes. It has to be spent on training dollars. And,
Okay.
and I had a good relationship with him, not at first because he beat me so many damn times. But after that, and then he phones me up out of the blue. I'm 20 years old at the time. He says, "Come on down to Oklahoma State. I got all the facilities. I'll help you with everything," right?
Wow.
And so rents me a house, and that his wife's athletic therapist. She's taking care of our injuries. She's got access to all the cafeterias and that for me, and then weight rooms, and we got everything. And he goes, "Bob, who else should we bring in? Let's you and I get ready for the Olympics together." Like, how many people got the? What's the value of a good relationship? You know what I mean? But most people wouldn't train. Everybody trains in their own little country. And Canada was no different. They go, "You have to stay in Canada and train." I said, "No, I'm not." I said, "I'm training with the best in the world." So actually, going back to that, my youngest son wrestled, and he was on national team for, my babies now. My kids are like 35, 33, and 31 now. But when they wrestled, he says, "Well, Dad," he comes up to me one time, he goes, "Dad, you know what they call a Bob Molle?" And I go, "Uh-oh, I've done a lot of crazy things in my day. What is a Bob Molle?" He says, "Seriously,
What's a Bob Molle?
Seriously,
What's
you
a
don't
Bob
know?"
Molle?
And he goes, "Seriously, you don't know that?" And I said, "No, where do you go?" He said, "I did a Bob Molle." And what's a Bob Molle? And he goes, "Where you find out who the top person is in the world and you go train with them." How many years later, a Bob Molle, you just go, "Okay, who's the best person in the world? He's from, Russia, or he's from Iran. He's from," you know what I mean? Japan, whatever. Go train with them.
Yeah. So another interesting, and tell me if this is a Bob Molle as well, because the story about you that I read about is that you actually hurt your back and you had, right before the Olympics. Is that right?
Yeah, I had back surgery.
Yeah. You had back surgery 18 days before the Olympics.
The final. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that. And you came out 18 days later, won the silver medal in the Olympics. Like that's just absolutely ludicrous. But I'm wondering what was going through your head at that time when you knew you had to get surgery and you knew you had this competition coming up? Like, actually, how did you hurt your back, first of all? And then, what was your mindset?
Well, this will be a good Google for you. If you want to take
make more sound bites. Hey, we're going to put this on Instagram. So give me a lot of nice sound bites.
This one is like crazy story. The world junior champion was a Canadian at the time. And he was only 20 years old, but he was 6'6", 6'7", probably 375 pounds. He was wrestling for Louisiana State University. He went into pro wrestling after. Google this one up. It's called The Earthquake. Google The Earthquake, the wrestler. His name was John Tenta. Unfortunately, John passed when he was probably in his early. He had cancer. I think, I'm not sure if it was kidney or that. He went into WWF and made millions, right?
Well, he looks familiar.
Yes, he was the Earthquake. Yes, he's from Surrey, BC. And him and I trained together. So I was training him twice a day. But you get under
Are you kidding me?
What do they got him? Robert, this is live at the Improv. How much they got him listed at, like height and weight?
So is it this guy? So I'm sharing my screen right now.
Yeah, look up. Yeah, but just go look up his Wikipedia. That's him, John Tenta. And John probably passed in his 40s, but great guy. I got along with him super well. But that's who they brought in to train.
Man, and I think his finishing move was basically he would like sit on people.
Yeah. You got a good memory. What's his Wikipedia say? Like, how big is he?
Geez, the Earthquake. What's his wiki say? He was born in 63, passed away in 06.
42?
Let's see. Yeah, and how big was he? It doesn't say what his weight is here. Oh, no, 468 pounds, 212 kilograms, 6'7".
6'7"? Easy 6'7", and probably, I'm guessing, when I wrestle him, probably 360. So I'm getting underneath his leg how many times, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Practice every time. And he was the world junior champion at the time.
Yeah. But by the way, my dad and I were we were wrestling, WWF.
Yeah. Well, that's why I didn't know that, but now you remember it, right? And you'll get all of his WWF from the Hulkster and that. I remember he had these little baubles. He phones me up one time, came in town. We go out for a beer, and he was saying these bobbleheads they made of them. I don't know how many million they sold for, but he got a percentage of it. And he said, Bob, they're just like crazy out there. You know what I mean? But he went in and made some huge money on that. But I was wrestling him twice a day. And then back was sore, got underneath him, that. Plus I was training twice a day, trying to even get better. And, you just try to fight through injuries, really. And got to a point where I couldn't even straighten up and warm up after practice. And they did an x-ray in my back, and it's called the disc had actually ruptured. A piece came off. It's called a sequestered disc. And a piece had broken off and gone into my nerve. So he said, Bob, we have no choice. You have to operate. Like, I'm thinking, rehab, I'm going to do what? And he goes, no, it's embedding into your nerve. You're going to lose your left leg, feeling on it pretty damn soon unless we operate. So it was like within the night where they were operating, it was just unbelievable. And I wake up, and so I'm in there for about 5 or 6 days in the hospital after major back surgery. And I watched the opening ceremonies from the hospital bed, so it wasn't a great time for me. I'm crying in bed by myself going, man, this is the worst thing that could happen to me in my life. How could I, you know what I mean? You go.
So what they do in that surgery? Like, do they take the disc out or?
Just take the one that had broken off, the sequestered part of it, the piece that broke off the nerve, and they just pull it out.
Okay, they pull it out. Do they replace it with anything, like anything in between?
And just try to get you to heal. And then going back to relationships, this will be an old one, but I think you're too young to remember. There was a guy named Gene Kiniski. Does that name ring a bell?
No.
He was another pro wrestler. He was kind of like the Hulk Hogan of the 60s. Go look up Gene Kiniski. His son was my best friend, and I was living with him in the States in the off season. Gene Kiniski. And so Gene came up into the hospital in recovery room, and I'm barely out of surgery. This is crazy. Like, people wouldn't believe this story. And he walks out and he goes, first thing he does, he goes, come on, Bob, we're going to get better for the Olympics. You know what I mean? And I'm just going like, what do you mean? And he goes, come on, we're not average, he used to say. Come on, we get up. What do you want to do? No, only thing I want to do is take a pee. I've been in surgery for how long? I'm in recovery. So he goes, come on up, let's go do it. So I go to step up. I'm like literally hours after back surgery. And I go to stand up, and he's kind of on the other side of the bed. And I go to stand up, and I just go, we're not average. We're special.
Yeah.
Boom. I took one step. I didn't even get my hands in front of me and just smacked my nose, blood all over the nurse hears without me hitting the cement,
Good
runs in.
God.
What's he doing? And he said, you're just getting up to go to the bathroom. He just came out of back surgery. He can't do that. And gee, his exact words I remember, he said, guess that didn't work. We'll try that again tomorrow. See you tomorrow.
That sounds like all the stories of old school wrestlers where just, okay, just grit it out.
Yeah.
Just
And
do it.
every day
Yeah.
he came out there for the first 6 or 7 days, and I walked around, took a little walk, a little longer each time, tried to walk the hallway. How do you eat an elephant, David?
Yeah.
One bite at a time. And I just got a little bit better so I could walk. And then I went up to the university. But if the Olympic super heavyweight match final was on the last day of the Olympics, and if it wouldn't have all been timed up perfectly, I would have never made it to the Olympics, because I wouldn't have, say if the wrestling started at the beginning of the Olympics, I would have never made it, right?
So how many days after surgery did you actually start competing again? Like there were probably like prelims and such,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So I don't know, 13 days or something like that.
How the hell did you recover that fast in time to, or at least grit through the pain? Like what did you do in order to,
Well,
yeah.
that's a loaded question, because a couple of things had to happen. One, I had to fly down to LA, go to the SFU, see if they'd pass me. They wouldn't pass me. They said, we're not going to, because you've been on painkillers and that. Yeah, and I have to get drug tested. So I knew I had to get off of painkillers within X amount of days, right? So there was
Yeah.
a whole bunch of dominoes that you had to kind of knock over. You had to pass the physical, you had to pass this, and then the Olympic team goes, well, we've never heard of a guy wrestle like after major back surgery and da da da. Are you crazy? And he goes, well, yeah, Bob, you ready to go? And I go, I think I can do it. And they practiced me out for a couple of days, and I said, let's go. Right? I'd qualified the
Wow.
weight in that, and so we said, and I kind of got a little bit better every day. Was there pain? Oh yeah, come on, I had a back surgery, and so the final was actually 18 days from the surgery.
Wow. Okay. All right. And then I guess your friend, right?
Gene Kaniski?
Your friend was saying, Gene Kiniski said, you're not average. That, how did that factor into that mindset? For anyone who's out there, like, I'm sure there's someone listening to this right now, Bob, who's going through something, whether it's something physical, something mental, something that's happening in their environment, and they're wondering, can I get through this? How do I get through this? So your friend Gene said, you're not average. What were you saying to yourself leading up to the Olympic, that 18 days of Olympics?
Great question. You got to think the highs and lows of that. You know what I mean? You watch
Yeah.
the opening ceremonies in a hospital bed crying, and you know what I mean. And everybody had given up, and the
Mm-hmm.
people that were visiting me says, "Hey, another 4 years, it'll happen fast." So they've already given up on me, right? Gene kind of went.
Yeah.
Gene was the best confidence booster I ever had in my life. He'd go, "Bob, we're going to take on the world. We're going to do this. We're going to that." Okay, I'm just drinking the Kool-Aid. But Gene used to say, he used to go, come on, Bob, it's mind over matter. And I said, mind over matter? He goes, yeah, if we don't mind, it don't matter. And he goes, come on, no one's wrote the book on this one. Let's go write our own book on this one, right? Like, oh, we could recover. And so his belief system in me was like unbelievable.
Yeah.
So, positive environment all the time. Like I was so fortunate. I think about my pro football days. I had great mentors around me, great positive in that, and great relationships. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that you just said, come on, let's go. We can do it. We're not
Yeah.
average. Yep, let's go. And there was and so I didn't know what the possibilities were. I'm only 21 at the Olympics. So I'm a little kid still between you and I, but well, maybe not physically a little kid, but you know what I mean? So my belief
Yeah.
system, he had told me, hey, we're not average. Let's go do it. Right.
It is amazing when you like, there is something to good old fashioned talk to yourself. If you believe in that, then it is. There's a lot to that, and surrounding yourself with the right people, right? The people who are going to
You
lift you
nailed it.
up. Yeah. Surrounding yourself who are going to lift you up. And it's people who are, sometimes they're not even your best friends, but they're the people who says, yeah, that sucks, and let's go.
Yeah.
We're going to keep going, and it's okay, right? And I've talked to a lot of people on this podcast, and there's a lot of advice that I've heard over my years of doing this podcast. But really, when you break it down, a lot of that advice breaks down to exactly what you said. You got to be around people who think in a realistic, but push you to be better, right? And the second thing is you got to believe it. You truly got to believe I'm not average. I am better than average. And that seemed like it propelled you to the next level. So this leads me to another question for you. You published a book, Get Comfortable Being Uncomfortable. And it sounds like this story is a good example of that. What compelled you to publish that book? And what message do you want to share with everyone through that book?
That's a loaded question too.
I'm asking a ton of loaded questions, and I'm getting a ton of things I didn't know you knew the earthquake. Okay.
Well, that's my back operation. He's got his initials on it.
Yeah, we haven't even gotten into like your relationship with Dan Gable. I think you mentioned like you had something.
Well, he was the Olympic coach for the U.S. team, right?
Yeah,
and we used to travel all over the world with the U.S. team back and then. Anytime you went to a communist country, the U.S., even Cuba, we always went together in a bus in the U.S. with the U.S. team. So we knew the U.S. team pretty good that way. But to answer your question, there's getting back to that, there was so many things about a positive environment. You're still a product of your environment, right? And so many people don't understand that. So I get rid of toxic people. I don't even bring them in life. I'm surrounded by, it's all about the relationships. Who do you surround yourself with? Are they going to pick you up when you're down and that and vice versa and stuff like that? Oh, 100%. I think of pro football, there's a guy named Chris Walby who was beside me. He was, most outstanding lineman. I got to play beside him for my first 5 years of my career. He was the one that inducted me in the Hall of Fame, actually, about 5 years ago, or maybe longer than that. And it's all relationships. We get together and you see these two, Chris is probably, I don't know what they got him listed at, but 6'7", 6'8", maybe taller than that, but he probably, back the scales went to 325 at the time. He'd hit it, and the metal would just about did. He go 325. I go, yeah, you can't be a sliver under 360. You know what I mean? But I got to play beside him, learn from him. We were all positive. We're in the Grey Cup every other year of our career, or in the finals, or the Grey Cup every other year of my career. Around great people, got along really well. And the unfortunate thing about that old line from 90 Grey Cup, I buried them all, the starting lineup. Chris Walby's the only guy left, him and I. And we fullbacks did, unfortunately running backs did. They're all passed in their 40s and 50s.
Yeah, you mentioned that 40s and 50s. It's very young.
Yeah.
I mean, one data point is like could be a coincidence. Two people, definitely a coincidence. 3, 4, 5 guys. There's a pattern here. Is there a pattern as to what made them pass away so young?
Combination of two things came out to me. Well, just looking back on the history of all of them, I'd say 50% of them were cancer, different kinds of cancer, and 50% heart attacks.
Jeez.
A lot of people would think it was head injuries and stuff like that, but the data pointing that. But then you go look in the NFL and you go to the average lifespan of an ex-NFL player, a professional football player. And I didn't even believe it at the time. I remember Googling it and said 55. Well, I buried my first 2 cards on that at 42.
Yeah.
I would have never done it for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So you've faced a lot of uncomfortable things and you've gotten comfortable with being uncomfortable. So when you wrote that book, what was going through your mind as to what did you want to teach others?
This is an embarrassing comment and you're going to hear it now, but not too many people know it. But the actual start of that book, I got hired by a guy named Robert Kiyosaki. He wrote a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And they were coming up doing a 2-day seminar he had called Rich Dad Radio and he brought me on for it. And I was a guest, and he goes, Bob, I'd love to come speak at one of our, 2-day seminars. We're going to be up in Edmonton, Canada. Would you be interested in being our startup or your energy guy? And that's what started. I worked with that group for probably 3 or 4 years at least, all over the world, and spoke. But when they first did it Monday night, it was kind of like a 2-day seminar, and they're just packed, right? And
Hmm.
I was the opening note he wanted to give me as the energy guy and just kind of spark everybody to get going. And the night before, you have wine and cheese, and so you meet all the speakers that are going to be on for the next 2 days. And I'm shooting with a couple guys. You kind of meet and you kick it off with them pretty good. And I do the speech. I walk off the stage and I walk through the back. And one of the guys that I knew from the speaking engagement, he's coming on next. This is exactly what he said. It's embarrassing as shit. He goes, walked off, and he goes, Bob, really loved your speech. And he's giving me the high five, and just like that, hey, you got to be energized to that. And then he says, too bad you're a dumbass. And I went, excuse me? And I go, what? And he goes, too bad you're a dumbass. I said, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? I didn't know if he was joking or what. And he goes, when you walked off stage, he said there was about 300 people that walked to the back of the room to buy your book. You didn't have a book, you're a dumbass. And exact words I said to him. I said, what would I write about? He says, and this is exactly what he did. He said, Bob, he says, you just told 3 great stories. I have a feeling you got 7 more and you could put a book together.
There you go.
And that's how it started. And then I said, put 10 stories together and you got a book. And the whole idea, you're a storyteller. Like, come on, just get something. You just write those stories down. Like the same thing you're telling, right? And that's what started the book. But the other piece, the name of the title, is actually goes back thousands of years, goes back to Taoism. It's an Eastern philosophy on it. I hired a mentor like long time ago, and he had done his PhD, and he was doing a program called High Order of Thinking. And I entered his course, met him at the gym. This is a long time ago. And High Order of Thinking was studied in Eastern philosophy. And we'd meet for, there was about 4 or 5 of us, so we'd meet for a full day with him for about a year. Anyways, I
Hmm.
got to know him really well, got a great relationship. We'd go out for coffee once in a while. And I asked him the question. I said, if you were to pull back all the information that you've accumulated over these years on Eastern philosophy, I said, how would you describe the biggest theme of it? And I remember the exact words. He looked at me and said, Bob, if I'm converting it to English, it means get comfortable being uncomfortable. I just went like this, like just resonated with me. You know what I mean? If you don't get uncomfortable, he says, you'll never grow. And
Yeah.
that's what stuck with me. So I bought that. Me and my wife told me to buy the domains. So I bought way back in the day. I owned the .com, get comfortable, being uncomfortable. And the phrase has gone viral, right?
Yeah.
And so I own the domains for it, but I also have the trademark for it too. So even though
Wow.
everybody
Okay.
uses it and abuses it like that, so I bought all those things, and then that's what I named the book. And because he said, converting to English, it's been there through thousands of years. It means you'll only, guess what, grow if it puts you in an uncomfortable situations. And I thought of all the uncomfortable, crazy things I did in my life, and I go, nothing was comfortable. And that was the genesis of the book, really.
Yeah. Yeah. You you talk about, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. But you also mentioned to me last time when we chatted was how you stick to your strengths when you're approaching situations and you simplify things. And you talked about this in the context of, like, say, a wrestling match, how you don't choke, in competition. So you simplify, and you talk about 3 animals or something like that. When you're talking about Eastern philosophy, that it sort of brought that up. But maybe to explain that to everyone out there. Like, I think there's a lot of folks out there who are approaching. They might be in a competition. They might be in a high stakes meeting, board meeting, whatever it might be. But how do you ensure that you don't choke
Oh, it's such a great thing.
in those moments?
Well, I was fortunate enough because I was the highest ranked wrestler in Canada at age 20, and I'm the youngest guy on the team too. I was in Kiev actually, the World Championships in '83. I placed 5th. So if you're top 5 in the world at the time, you get assigned a sports psychologist. Because I was the first person that won an Olympic medal in wrestling in 75 years in Canada. But at 20, I'm still in university, but I'm playing football at the time, wrestling. I'm trying to do three things, full academic course load. Is it comfortable? No. You get up at 6 a.m, you get this, you're training 3 times a day. And the other thing that went with this, all the stuff that I did, they assigned me a sports psychologist, and they reached out to a number of wrestlers, and they did some research on me, and they just said, hey, why is Bob so tough to wrestle? And then the information came back when they were talking to different people. He said, for a big guy, first step was quick. So all I associated that with an animal. How are you going to think about quick? And they said, assign it to anything you want to do. What's it going to do? My word was cheetah. I assigned it to cheetah, right? And then next one, what happens? Once Bob gets a hold of your leg, he never lets go. Next one, alligator. And then I got a great leg ride where you saw that picture of me pulling on the Japanese wrestler.
Japanese guy's leg. Yeah.
And once I got a leg ride that most people can't stop, I turned virtually everybody on it. So once I get a hold of them, anaconda. And I'm turning you, right? So it's just wash, rinse, repeat. So I got a mental thing. It doesn't matter what happens in the match. Like you walk in and 15,000 people, like the viewing audience for the Olympic final. I remember a media guy telling me after, he said, Bob, it's just under 600 million people. You know what I mean? If you take that all in beforehand, you know what I mean? It's a little too much. So I didn't know any of that stuff, but you've got 15,000 people for this sold out audience in Anaheim Convention, because I got the American in the final in his home, right? And no different than the Soviet Union. They're packed 15,000 people for the super heavyweight match. And they got 600 million people watching the Olympic final from around the world. So how do you process all that information? I don't process it. It doesn't. I just wash, rinse, repeat. I got three things I got to do. So you get a shitty call from the referee. Do you bitch? Do you complain? People lose their cool. You know what I mean? What happens? All I'm doing is wash, rinse, repeat. Guess what? Cheetah. First step's quick, right? Boom, 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 boom. I'm doing this. I'm doing number two. I'm doing number three. Out of bounds call. Boom. What am I doing? Wash, rinse, repeat. Do the processes. If you do the right processes, the end result will be there, right? So all I do is keep my mind really simple. I know what my processes are. If I do the three things that my strengths are, guess what I do? I end up, I had a pretty good college record. I was like through university, 137-5 or something like that. You know what I mean? And so, it made it simplistic for me. I just go, I know what I'm doing. And it doesn't matter what happens in the match, and still wash, rinse, repeat.
Yeah. And that's also like reminds me of the importance of what you tell yourself. So your simplicity was quick as cheetah, grab is like alligator. And then when you're flipping someone, you're like an anaconda.
Right.
So keeping it simple. Those words in your mind are very offensive. It is about positive, what you want to do. It reminds me of a story of Randy Couture. He used to be a UFC fighter, but I believe he was an Olympian in the US. But he said he lost matches in wrestling back in the day when he's ahead, and what he would say to himself was, avoid this, avoid X, whatever it might be. It was all about avoidance, or don't do this, don't do that. That's how he lost.
Yeah.
So what he learned from that was he needed to say, no, I need to go grab him. Like whatever that mantra is, get him, grab him quick, hold that. And he never lost ever again after that. And that's the importance of it sounds like it must be positive. It must be offensive, what you tell yourself, but it also must be simple in what you're telling yourself as well.
Wash, rinse, repeat, right?
Rinse, repeat.
And I do those three processes. So it doesn't change the mindset of anything that's going on in the match. Guy shoots a single leg. Guess what I'm doing? Right? Quick foot. And so if you do that, you don't deviate from it. Make it simplistic for you. And then it's like a broken record. It doesn't stop. And really what you're doing is the right process. But actually, the guy that taught me that was the guy, Bruce Baumgartner, the Olympic guy. We didn't have computers back in the day. You're talking 1984. So he had VHS tapes of all the wrestlers in a, kind of like size of my office. Him and I are sitting there, and there was stacks of VHS tapes. And we pulled them down. Here's China. Here's Iran. We knew everything. And he was the one that changed my mindset. He goes, what are the top three moves we're going to do on every wrestler? If we're wrestling, if we draw this guy, what are you going to do? What are the top three matches? So it was really focusing on your strengths. And that's what brought me into the business line where all I do is I sit down with clients all over the thing. I do strength finder, and I find out what their strengths are and make sure they understand it. Well, yeah, but I'm not very good at accounting. We're not hiring you for the accounting. And really, David, we refer to it, the schools teach us is wrong. If you think about the educational system, it's screwed up because I had 3 kids too. Now I got 5 grandkids. But if you go to school, say my daughter came back, she's got 4 A's and an F. What do you think the parent-teacher interview conversation is going to be about?
Oh, I come from an Asian family. Trust me.
Yeah. What are we going to talk about?
It doesn't matter. If you got 99.99%, what happened to the 0.0001?
Exactly. They refer to the F. And my daughter turns around and said, I got 4 A's. And then if I'm a bad parent, guess what I'm doing? Or I think I'm being a good parent. I ground her. She gets a tutor, and I take away her cell phone or something. You know what I mean? Now she tells me it's trigonometry, Dad. I'm never going to use it in my life. I hate the teacher, and now I've just grounded her. She hates me too. So it's backwards, right? Because if we had turned around and said, my daughter works for Lululemon in Australia, and she designs stuff, and that's what she loves to do. But if I would have focused on the A and say, what are these A's? Oh, Dad, I love this and this and this. But guess what? Educational system, they'll make you work on the F, right?
Yep.
And all I do is work on my strengths. And when I walk into a company, that's why I can turn companies around. I go, put this person there, put that person there, get the right people and get them in the right seats. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right people, right seats, focus on their strengths. So Bob, a couple final questions for you. And these are quick ones. So for those who are out there right now facing something uncomfortable, what's one piece of advice you can give them right now?
That's a great question. And the biggest piece of advice is attack that, because we have such a stigma on failure. The big one for me was I found out at a young age, failure was part of the process. You know what I mean? But we have a stigma. Oh, he failed at this and that. Fail more.
Fail more.
And my coach told me in a different way, my Olympic coach, his line to me when I lost the college badge and it was embarrassing. And he walked by me in my head in a big crowd. It was a sold out basketball arena in the States. And he walked by me and he says, when you lose, don't lose the lesson. So it's stupid mistake if you didn't learn from it, right? So think about that every time you attack it. I'm uncomfortable. Well, this is how you grow, right? And then you're going to learn from it, right? And that's the bonus of it. You just keep attacking those things, right? When you lose, don't lose the lesson. What'd you learn from it so you can go forward now, right?
Awesome. So Bob, last question to you. I ask every single guest this last question. What's one question I haven't asked you, but I should have asked you?
What's one question you should have asked me that you didn't ask me? Actually, you asked about my ups and downs. A lot of people don't ask me about probably my biggest failures. They probably taught me the most, right?
What are your biggest failures that taught you the most?
Now you're asking it. Are you allowed to say it that bad?
I get to edit this podcast any way I like.
You're in control, right?
That's my strength.
I learned more from my failures, and this is even the more aggressive reason to try stuff that makes you uncomfortable, because you learn more from that than you do, the embarrassing times where I lost the match that we just talked about, packed out stadium. I already have an Olympic medal in college, so I'm wrestling a top ranked U.S. wrestler, but I beat the hell out of them every time I wrestled them, and I lose to them in front of a packed house in their back stadium. And then my coach hit me with that line, when you lose, don't lose the lesson. And I just go, my mindset's got to be razor sharp, 6 minutes, get your shit together. You know what I mean? And I went and I just turned it around right there. And I go, you and that, you need to own that. He said, you need to prepare mentally better for every match. There's no way this should happen to you again. And it never did. But in college, I learned it, preparation. So I'm mentally ready, physically ready, and everything else. And I go, that'll never happen to me again, right? Like I was so embarrassing. Yeah. And I said, right then, I said, I'm going to change the way I do things, right?
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, Bob, if folks out there listening need to find you, what's the best way to find you and what you're up to?
Traveling a little too much right now, actually, but I work with companies all over. I got kind of 3 businesses. Obviously, the book, Get Comfortable Being Uncomfortable. Amazon sells that. That book's been out for about 3 or 4 months. On the positive side, it just hit the top 10 list for North America for business books. So that was a nice thing. So it's getting great momentum on that stuff. The biggest thing I do is I consult for major companies that I got across North America and putting teams
Mm,
together. It's all about putting the right people in their right seats, right? And getting the right people.
yep.
And so that's the other piece on that. But bobmolle.com, BOBMOLLE, but they can Google that piece to it. The thing I like doing the best is actually putting conferences together. So I got people that come up and I'll put, anything from a couple hour workshop on to a full day workshop. And I just had 10 CEOs come in from Winnipeg last weekend. So those are fun. They're interactive. I love to change the way people think. And the best thing I do with people is, they have kind of a paradigm shift and they go, oh, I never thought of it that way. You go, there's how you could do it. And they go, when the light goes on for them, those are so
The
fun.
aha moment is wonderful to see.
It energizes them, right? And so I go into that. There's a couple different things. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. Also, I own the domains for that too. So people can look on that and have a peek on that.
Well, Bob, it was a pleasure. It was also an honor to speak with you today.
Pleasure mine.
I would love to do this again with you in a few months, if that's okay.
Yes, I have a feeling
All
you
right.
and I get along.
I think you and I should go to a bar and record from there. All right. But look, Bob, pleasure speaking with you today. And for everyone listening out there, thank you very much for joining us. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much.
That's a wrap on this episode of the Coachful Coaching Leadership Podcast. I'm David Fung, and my mission is to help leaders grow, lead with impact, and build thriving teams. If you found this valuable, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a fellow leader. Until next time, keep leading with purpose.